Well, it's a great day. The sun's shining on us because it shines on the righteous, so they say. And our cause is righteous because what we're facing in Britain are massive cuts that affect every single one of us, whether we work in the public sector or whether we are public sector service users. But those cuts also affect people in the private sector. Because if the public sector is losing staff, then the money in the economy isn't there. If the money in the economy isn't there, people won't be buying services and goods from the private sector. And it was very interesting, a story I've told before, but I'll tell it again, about construction workers at the Leicester University. Construction workers who were told that they expected to have at least 3 years of work. And during the time that they were actually building extensions to Leicester University, their company told them that was revised down to 6 months. And the reason it was revised down to 6 months was because the public sector were withdrawing contracts. And there is a clear example of how the private sector is affected by public sector cuts. So this isn't about the public versus private. It's about every single worker, whatever they do in Britain, being affected by cuts. Cuts, which has been said many, many times again, but it's worth reiterating, that are totally unnecessary. My union estimate now that in excess of £126 billion worth of tax goes uncollected in this country. And 30% of that is deliberately evaded. People actually illegally not paying their tax. Now, do you think they're people like you and me? I don't. I think that that is the interest of big business, it's the interest of the bankers who put us in this position in the first place. And we're paying, because every time that capitalism has a crisis, who pays for it? The working people pay for the crisis, a crisis that they didn't create. Because one thing that capitalists are very good at, and that's protecting themselves. When they've made a mess, they can find a way to protect themselves. But today is, well, a celebration. Tomorrow is International Workers' Day. And I remember when we actually set up Leicestershire Against the Cuts, or when at least my branch carried the resolution that then led to Leicestershire Against the Cuts being set up. And it was against the backdrop, because it was in the summer of last year, it was in a backdrop of unions throughout Europe, in Greece, in Spain, and in France, Italy, all campaigning for public sector strikes, general strikes, actually taking place in Europe, which occurred in October. Now, the reality is, the 26th of March was a magnificent show of strength by working people, middle-class people, and people who have never been on demonstrations before in London, showing what they thought about the cuts. But I have to say this to the TUC. If you think that that was the event and that nothing else is going to happen, then you need to have a serious rethink. Dave Bean earlier, the Deputy President of my own union, the PCS, said that we will be balloting for strike action. We've got to get it through our conference, but I'm absolutely convinced we will get it through our conference. The NUT has already voted for strike action. The ATL, not a union that's actually noted for militant action, has also voted for that. We've got the Headmasters Union meeting this weekend, and on Radio 4 this morning, their General Secretary said that their executive unanimously voted for a motion to go to their conference for strike action in June. What we can see in June is the beginnings of the movement in Britain in the same way as it was in Greece, in Italy, in Spain, all over Europe. And maybe we're coming a bit late to the party, but I'll tell you one thing. All those unions in those countries have actually been waiting for the British Labour movement to move its little finger, metaphorically speaking, and to take action. Because they know that the British working class, one of the oldest industrial organised group of workers in the world, and certainly Europe, that when we move into activity, it will give real heart to those people in those parts of Europe. So we're on the eve of something important. Leicestershire Against the Cuts is a broad-based coalition. We're a coalition of trade union and community organisations. We want to bring together all those people fighting cuts in Leicestershire, but we don't see that as being on our own. We want to link up with other groups nationally, but we also want to link up with groups internationally, because this is an international struggle. Don't let the condemneds kid you that it's all one party's fault that we're in the mess that we are. There has been an international economic crisis, and that crisis has been caused by international capitalism. The only way you can fight international capitalism is if the working class internationally is united, fighting in its own countries but fighting together. And you'll see on my t-shirt somebody who's an inspiration to me. Che Guevara, leader of one of the leaders of the revolution in Cuba, who met his end in Bolivia, killed by the forces of reaction. But there's one thing that's associated with Che Guevara, and I want you to say it today. And it's in Spanish, and it goes, hasta la victoria siempre, and it means always until victory. So let's just say that in the Spanish. Hasta la victoria siempre. Let's say it again. Hasta la victoria siempre. Always until victory. And united together, we will be victorious. We will defeat the condemned. We will defeat any government that wants to take action against the working class. Because the old phrase, stands together, is always the right phrase. That the working class united can never be defeated. And that's the message today. In our small way, we've shown that. So hasta la victoria siempre.